Okay, Councilmember Kitchen.
Okay, so we're under question 4 code text, right? Is that what we're under?
Yes.
Okay, so I have some suggested changes that are on page 6 of my change. And that is to, let's see. Okay, I'm inserting as well as other compatibility triggers, and I've listed those there. And those are standards related to noise, uses, utility screening, trash loading and pickup zones, as well as shielded lighting. And then I speak in 2 to green infrastructure from draft 3 and continue the tree preservation policy as well as increasing tree canopy. So basically what it's saying is maintain draft 3's no build and vegetative buffers between residential and commercial uses, as well as other compatibility triggers. And then it goes on to describe what those are. Does that make sense? Or?
I'm trying to think if that's an amendment to code text generally, or if that's an amendment to her language. She's proposed that the highest density residential house zone shouldn't trigger compatibility onto the lowest density residential multifamily zone. That in this instance.
I see what you're saying.
I don't think yours is an amendment to that. I think we get to yours when we get to your amendments, because you're proposing something different than that.
Mayor Adler,
yes.
Just for a point of clarification, there are a lot of hers and she's up here, and I don't know which one you're referring to.
I apologize.
No worries. But which one are you referring to? Page. Okay.
Page.
Councilmember Ellis.
I think the confusion is because it's the Adler-Ellis amendment.
I'm going to call that from here on out Amendment A.
Right.
Okay? Amendment A. The Amendment A language speaks to the relationship of 2 residential structures. It says one shouldn't trigger compatibility.
Okay, I can see what you're saying. So my amendment is not on this.
Correct.
But I do have a question about it.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand what the goal of this sentence is. So does it mean that an R4, for example, would not trigger compatibility onto an R1?
RM1, yes.
RM1. And does it mean, when it uses the term compatibility, is it using that only for height, or does it also include the other things that are compatibility, like noise, uses, trash, that kind of thing?
It would include some of those other things, except that it specifically says that no build vegetation and buffers between residential and commercial uses have to be maintained. But between residential uses, it would not trigger compatibility.
Okay, but there's other things besides vegetative buffers. There's compatibility standards include noise, uses, utility screening, trash, loading and pickup zones, as well as shielded lighting. So is this saying that between a high density, like an RM4, and an RM1, that there's no compatibility related to trash, loading and pickup, shielded lighting, and those kinds of things?
Yes.
I think you're saying, I think you're talking past each other potentially.
Okay.
This is between 2 multifamily zones.
Right.
Or the highest end multifamily, or highest end house scale multifamily, something like R4, and to not just use draft 3 text, a 4 to 6-plex.
Yeah.
And the smallest apartment building.
Okay.
We don't want to not be triggering compatibility between those 2, so that's not related to single family.
But okay, so I have 2 different questions, yeah. so that helps me understand. So basically, that would be like a 4 or 6-plex versus a duplex? Is that what you're saying?
4 or 6-plex compared to, say, an 8 to 10-plex. So this is right at the right behind the corridor zoning.
Right.
You would go down to smaller apartments potentially, and then 4 to 6-plex. The idea is we don't want that 4 or 6-plex to knock out the more corridor type zone.
But let's also. It sounds to me like when you talk about compatibility, you're not talking about the standards like noise, etc.
Looks like the staff has something on
zoning. So to address your question, Councilmember Kitchen, in draft 3, those standards like shielding
Yeah.
And screening were taken out of compatibility and were
Okay.
just general standards. So compatibility in draft 3 really refers more to the setbacks and the tent only.
Okay, so with that answers my question, and I just wanted to make it clear that that's what we were talking about here. Okay.
Yes.
So then what would be I'm sorry, I still have another question.
Setback and tent.
So what is the impact of this then?
It appears that, so if you remove compatibility between the highest residential house scale and the lowest residential multifamily, it would just mean that screening, shielding, those requirements would still occur.
Right.
But that the setback and tent would not be imposed.
So in other words, the height difference between the large apartment complex and the smaller multifamily, there's no standards that would apply to that.
Right. There are no standards that would impact the heights, for instance.
So
in
you
that
could
case.
have, okay, so I
Well, you
just wanna-
said large multifamily would be the smallest multifamily and the largest house scale.
Oh, okay. So the highest density residential house scale, give me an example of what that is.
That would be like a fourplex building.
Okay. So between a fourplex and what's the lowest density residential multifamily?
That would typically be like a 12-plex building,
Okay.
something like
Okay.
that.
All right, so you're talking about the difference between a fourplex and a 12-plex, for example. There wouldn't be any height restrictions other than what's on the zone.
Other than zone.
And their heights are very similar.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head, but they're close. They're not that different because they're right next to each other in the zoning intensity table.
Okay. Well, I mean, you probably know it off the top of your head. What is the height difference?
I actually don't know off the top of my head, but I can check if
That's
you'd
all right.
like. Okay.
I've got it here.
Okay? Anything else on page 5? Of amendment,
yes.
of Amendment A.
Yes.
Yes?
Are we going on to the zoning map now?
Yes.
Are we past the, okay.
Yes?
On the zoning map, I have changes on page 6 of my document.
Okay. You don't want to add the transit priority network?
I didn't say that. I'm trying to
The amendment in zoning map offered in Amendment A is to add the transit priority network.
okay. But A starts at a minimum, doesn't it? I'm not talking about the part above it.
You've gone on to,
Yeah,
skipping down to A, okay.
yeah.
I'm in 4A, okay,
That's where I have the changes.
okay.
Or I have additional changes, but they're additions. So,
Okay.
so if you look at page 6, so what I've suggested here is that what we do is in A, what I've suggested is that okay. So I'm suggesting here to define the maximum height allowed by right, plus affordable housing bonus, along activity corridors and in activity centers, and then establish regulations that create a step-down effect So I've picked up language from Councilmember Flanagan, Harper Madison, and Renteria for that portion. And then I'm going on to say that in defining the conditions for mapping the step down, I go on to suggest conditions that some of them pick up the language that you have, and then I add some additional conditions that are taken from the Planning Commission's Draft 3 recommendation report to the council on June 22nd. And those, so I've kept the location on the transit priority network, which I think relates to the conditions that were proposed before. I've kept location in a higher opportunity area. And then I've added orientation of blocks relative to corridors, residential blocks sited by Main Street or mixed-use type zoning lots, bound by other zones used for environmental features such as cliffs and other kinds of topography, and then localized flooding. And let me just say, I'm writing this as including but not limited to. So it allows for the staff suggesting additional conditions that would be appropriate. It's just saying that these are some of those, and they pick up they pick up the four that were suggested. The other two are picked up in another way in here. But so it's basically taking the 4 conditions that were suggested, adding a couple more from the Planning Commission recommendations, and then leaving it as an including but not limited to in case the staff, in bringing back information to us, suggest additional conditions. And then it goes on from there to include the city manager shall also explore the following conditions, and it keeps the what we've been talking about not overlapping the majority of a neighborhood. It keeps the reductions related to vulnerable areas. It keeps the step-down transition areas as quickly as possible. And then at the last one, I suggest considering split zoning. And then finally, as B, I suggest that the city manager shall provide to council an analysis of the affordable housing and housing capacity yield when presenting the proposed mapping. So essentially what I'm doing here is saying that instead of saying that we're only going to map according to these 4 criteria, I'm suggesting that we go back and say to staff to map based on a set of criteria that it's including but not limited to. And I've suggested some criteria that I think
Let
really...
me ask some questions for clarification for me.
Oh,
So I think
okay.
I can support this.
Okay.
Is the language that you have here in 3A, 2, and 4, is it the same language that was on the other draft?
Yes.
So that's the same language been brought
Yes.
forward?
Yes.
Okay. So with respect to that, I think I might be able to agree with the language in blue about employment, and then A, and then the changes with respect to I. 2, I have difficulty with. But then the next items that you have, the bullet points that you have, the next 6 bullet points, I think I'd be okay with those if you move those down to section 4
Mayor,
as factors to consider.
I have some of this written down because I've been thinking about something similar,
Okay.
and so maybe I can hand out something written.
Okay.
It's on yellow paper. I wish around pink or something so that it wouldn't mash in with everything that you've already got. I similarly am okay with everything that is in sort of the blue section that seemed to be from Renteria, Harper Madison, Flanagan, and your work. What I'm suggesting, maybe once you've got it, what I'm suggesting is I don't like removing those 4 as the primary 4 criteria.
Okay.
The 4 that we've already suggested. But then, because I do think that street grid, high opportunity area, transit or activity corridor, vulnerable should be the primary way of evaluating transition zones. However, what I've done is taken your other criteria and created a new section that says the city manager shall also explore the following conditions: orientation, residential blocks that are sited by by Main Street or mixed-use blocks bound by other zone localized flooding, whether it's appropriate to split zone or not split zone. So I've added those in as secondary while leaving the original document's criteria as primary.
Oh, okay, I have a slight change to suggest.
Sure.
Okay. City manager shall also use the following conditions as appropriate when mapping transition areas.
I think that's the same meaning.
So you're okay with that?
I'm happy to
Say
hear
that
from
again.
other folks.
The city manager shall also use the following conditions as appropriate when mapping transition areas, and then use those bullets.
I'm fine with that.
And so you're moving that, are you moving that under?
That would become 4L in as an amendment to the amendment A. Does that make sense? So this would not remove anything. It would just be added in as 4L.
Oh, as L at the end, okay. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Does
And then,
that
of
make
course,
sense?
as amendments, also the agreed upon things, which was the very beginning and the last line that you moved, which I think there was no objection to.
The
This-
last line meaning the city manager shall provide the council an analysis
Correct.
of the affordable housing and housing capacity yield when presenting the proposed, okay.
And then everything before the two little i's, I think also wasn't objectionable, which is the way that you're
The
considering
employment and other
compatibility from the corridor.
uses,
Correct.
just the employment and other uses to create complete communities, that language? Okay.
Okay, so help me understand. Let me catch up to you.
Mayor, is it possible for us to kind of take it from the top on this item?
Yeah.
It is. There's
Okay.
just no way. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I think the challenge here is that some of you have sort of talked with one another, and you kind of have a sense of what documents you're talking about. It is almost impossible
I
to
only-
catch up with these documents.
I
So
only
if we
wish-
could,
I only
we've got
wish-
like embedded within embedded within
Right.
embedded. So if we could just kind of catch up to the, if we could start with the
Okay, so,
amendment A.
right,
And then Councilmember Kitchen had proposed, you had proposed substituting your zoning map edits
Yes,
on these.
yes.
So where are we with that?
Well, what's being proposed instead of taking all of mine in the way that I suggested it, it is taking parts of mine and parts of what Councilmember
And parts of
Cassar-
Councilmember Cassar's. But can
Yeah.
we
You
can we
want me to
go
walk
from
you
the
through
top?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can we go from the top
Okay.
and say what of your
Okay.
what of your page 6,
Okay.
number 3
Okay,
is
so,
proposed to be in?
yeah,
And then when we get to Councilmember Cassar's F or whatever L, it's easy for me to see where that inserts. It's not easy. It's not clear for me to.
Okay.
We could go one by one through your
okay,
issues.
so if you look at zoning map, there, and on mine, page 6, there's some language in blue.
Yeah, we can move kind of fast. I just didn't know which were in it because there was some feedback.
it's
Okay.
okay. I had the same question. I was going to ask the same question you did. So,
Mayor.
I need, so there are two documents you should have in front of you at this point.
Yes, one of our, we had taken out as
Yes.
seen in place like Clarksville, Hyde Park,
Yeah,
North
exactly.
Loop, and Tarrytown.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So,
we kept Clarksville.
yeah, you kept.
they're on the zoning map,
Okay,
the
so,
last.
so waiting just a second so that I can catch up. On Amendment A,
Yes.
I am looking at page 5. All right, where it has 3 zoning map. Okay, I'm sorry, down below that, 4A. The revised zoning map should include a transition zone that will eliminate the impact of competitive parcels all along afterwards and with activity centers. Then there's A, at a minimum. Okay, now I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at Councilmember Kitchen's page 6 of 8,
Yeah,
which
we-
has the zoning map.
This sentence here, we took it out on Jimmy's.
Okay. Okay, so Greg and I wasn't following what you guys were talking about.
Okay,
So if you guys could help me understand.
okay, so the language above that, right by zoning map, that's in blue, striking the end of it, so striking Hyde Park, North Loop, and Tarrytown, So that blue that starts with employment and other uses to create complete communities.
And goes down to, quote, complete communities,
Clarksville.
period, close quote.
Yeah.
And can you explain why we're removing Clarksville, Hyde Park, North Loop, and Tarrytown?
I'm happy to if you're looking for me to do that.
Well, this is from you guys.
Well, so essentially what we didn't get the opportunity to do is just introduce a revised version of this. So within our group, we decided that those neighborhoods weren't necessary for this particular example, especially once we start to consider what the implications of those are. Clarksville is a perfect example of what we're talking about when we're talking about the village center complete community. And for the sake of simplification, one example was sufficient.
Okay. I mean, they're all examples, I would suggest, of complete communities.
I wouldn't
They've been-
necessarily argue with that. I just think one example was simple and sufficient.
So, Anne, you were proposing as seen in places like Clarksville? Were you keeping
Yeah,
one?
I
in?
was picking up language that had been posted by
Okay.
Councilmember Flanagan.
And I'm going to suggest that we keep the original. I think
Okay,
it's instructive.
I just want to understand it first. I want to, before we start
Okay.
parsing it, I have the same question you had. I want to know what we're
Okay.
doing here.
So, I
And
think
where's it going?
Regardless of which neighborhoods we name, we are generally accepting the word employment all the way down to the word transition zones at the end of little I. From the word employment in blue to the word transition zones at the end of little I, accepted.
Okay, so how does that compare then to 4A? So 4A, where it says the revised zoning maps, would replace the language that begins at a minimum? Or does that language stay in?
That,
I'm looking on Amendment A.
Where's the word at a minimum?
I'm trying to figure out where in Amendment A it goes.
Oh,
Is it in addition to 4A?
I think we just want to add. I don't know if I didn't understand this as changing intent. I thought this was just compatible and more. Sorry, bad pun. That it was just more description. I thought that this was just more description.
I'm just trying to
more
figure out how
guide-
to place it on here.
it's replacing A. And then
replacing 4A.
it keeps B because that's where you say should map.
Right.
So it's replacing A.
Because you're proposing A and then I.
So
Where would we begin?
So can I take a stab at it? So as Councilmember Cassar said, you're taking 3 all the way down to A little I and stopping there at zones. That's replacing what you have as 4A. Then you're picking up 4B, going back to yours, keeping yours, because that's the right, Councilmember Cassar, you wanted to keep that.
Right. Leaving the existing Amendment A language, but adding 4L.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
That's right.
Sorry, just a little bit slower because I'm following up. So beginning with zoning map 3, did you mean to take out the transit priority network, or can that language
No,
continue?
that can stay.
Okay, from fronting activity quarters, comma, the transit
Wait,
priority.
no, I already have transit priority network in my language. It's just not capitalized. So it's a straight replacement of my language 3 down to A little I, replaces everything on page 5 and the top of page 6, and then you start again with your B.
Okay, so where you have transit priority network, I'm looking at compatibility standards and initial mapping should work in a way that maximizes housing capacity on parcels, fronting activity corridors, and in the Exhibit A, or Amendment A, at that point it adds the words, the transit priority network.
Yeah, that's on mine too. I've got
But
this-
it's not there, it's down below somewhere, right?
No, it's in A. Yeah, it's in A.
So it's not there, it's down below.
That's why I said you take all of this.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's-
I'm trying to just compare it to what's in A. So I'm reading Amendment A. Amendment A says compatibility standards and initial mapping should work together in a way that maximizes housing capacity on parcels fronting activity corridors, comma, and then it adds the transit priority network.
Right.
But you're saying not add it there
It's in my,
because you've included it somewhere else down below.
I've included it in A.
Right, okay. So now I want to look at that and see if it has the same meaning moved down into a lower paragraph.
It says the revised zoning map should reduce the impact of compatibility standards on development for parcels along the transit priority network. And then it goes on from there.
Should it be in both places the same way corridors and activity centers are in both places?
Well, you could, you know.
Okay, so let's put it in both places. The transit priority corridors, we'll put that in both places. Okay.
Yeah. I see
Then
what
in
you're
place, then it gets to the revised zoning map should reduce, that will eliminate the impact of compatible development. I see that's blue, so that's for parcels along priority centers in redefining compatibility standards. The code should, and then Councilmember Kosar, you were recommending accepting I. Is that right?
Yes, but in my accepting of this, I didn't see any strike-throughs of the Adler-Ellis language, so I'm just saying that I think this all sounds good to add into Amendment A, not to. I'm sure, and I would be interested in hearing whether you mean any strike-throughs, in which case I would just want to know what the point is of striking through. But if this was just all an addition, then it seems fine. Because when I read this, it seems to align with the intent of the existing Adler-Ellis language.
Yeah, so I think this was to provide the absence of the trigger. So I think that the A, 4A, still needs to remain.
That's what I'm saying. I don't.
But I have an objection to 4A, and I'll explain why.
Okay. Can we take that once, if we are good with this? Can we go to that objection if that might be the only objection on the table?
Okay.
And then we can, of course, vote and debate that issue. But it sounds like we might have.
We'll have a vote on 4A on Amendment A in just a moment. So we're going to park that for a second. We'll come back and vote that. What about the kitchen language II?
I think
I'm taking that out.
But this is coming out. II is coming out.
Well, because I'm understanding, I would love for you to accept it, but I'm thinking
right.
not, right?
Little II
Right.
and all the way down to consider split zoning on the next page comes out and instead is replaced with the language here that still.
Okay, so I don't see, all the way to consider from II down to, and does consider split zoning stay in?
No, because it goes all the way, because we have split zoning considered on this separate page.
Okay, so what's happening is the amendment would be to begin with the zoning map language on kitchen, adding the transit priority network, striking Hyde Park, North Loop, and Tarrytown, keeping A, keeping I. Right? And then the question.
That's right.
Sorry, but what is the appropriate time to talk about the striking of the examples?
In just a moment.
Okay.
In just a moment. I'm still just trying to daylight what it is that's being proposed. Period F. Clarksville, Hyde Park, and then A, and then I.
Right.
Those things would be moved on top of Amendment A, 3, and the first sentence of 4. We're going to come back and look at A in a second because you're proposing to strike A.
We can talk about it.
And so you're proposing to strike A. And then
We go back to your
then
B.
we have Cassars, then we go back to Amendment A, and we would be adding an L down at the
Right.
bottom.
That's right.
And that L, it's a higher case L on Cassar's amendment, but it would actually be a lowercase L.
That's right.
4L, the city manager also used as these things. And then there's B on yours,
Well, I wouldn't use my B unless.
so we don't need B anymore.
Well, I mean, I would love to include B, but I don't think.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait a minute. B,
No.
yeah, we said we'd keep B.
The little B at the end of split zoning
keep that.
can stay. That's fine.
And does that become, that stays as B?
That just gets added into Amendment A.
Does it
It would
become
be-
M? Is it? No, it's a different deal. It's not. Okay, got it. All right. So really the two issues seem to be the taking out of the examples and what happens with lowercase a.
No, I think, well, wait a minute. When
In
you,
other words, if we accept the amendments as it was just offered,
oh, okay.
what we need to discuss is taking out the examples after Clarksville
Gotcha.
and whether lowercase a
Right,
is
right.
included.
That's right.
All right, so let's talk about those two things now. Councilmember Tovo, you want to raise that issue?
Sure. I've lost track of who actually introduced this language, but I'm supportive of it, and I think these are good examples, and I think removing them at this point suggests in some way that they are not good examples of village center type low-density mixed-use commercial use neighborhoods, or that the regulations shouldn't continue to allow them. I'll just remind, I think it was Hyde Park that was actually called out by our consultants as a great example of a complete community because people live within walking distance, many of local services, and various other things. So I'm going to propose that we keep it as it was introduced in Councilmember Kitchen's amendment. And I
took from.
Okay. So the first issue in front of us is, do we keep
Hyde Park, North Loop, and Tarrytown.
yes, Hyde Park, North Loop, and Tarrytown. How strongly do you feel about that, Councilmember Harper Madison? I mean, I couldn't tell if what you were saying is you thought there was a substantive reason to take it out or not, and I'm just trying to follow.
Considering this is the latest I've been in this building thus far, and I don't intend to be here any later than we have to be, it's certainly not something I want to argue over unnecessarily. But I would be willing to go ahead and put this out there that I think we could come up with better examples of complete communities. The truth of the matter is, in terms of what my opinion of how we should move for great examples of complete communities, great examples of village centers, I don't think the city of Austin has them yet. We need to create them. So I stopped at Clarksville because I thought it was a good example without introducing any contention. I don't know if you were here earlier when we had the conversation about Hyde Park, but it wasn't exactly the most lack of contention conversation we've had thus far. So I really just want us to keep moving in the direction of progress and not get hung up on things that could potentially be contentious. But I don't want to fight about that.
What if we just took out all the examples?
Sure.
And just said use the neighborhoods to create
Sounds
complete
great.
communities.
Okay, I'll just remind the group that you were the ones who introduced those as examples.
I understand,
I
but
just don't understand.
but I just
I
don't know that
understand.
that's anything. We know what a complete community is.
No, I thought that came from your document initially.
It says CM Kitchen right up top.
I thought
No,
said she took
I
it
took
from.
it from y'all's
Hey,
first
hey, hey,
document.
hey, hey, I don't think anybody, and we all know what a complete community is. Let's just strike the examples, and then we don't have to worry about which
But I
ones
do
are
want
chosen.
to. But I think the point was that it came from the document that you all introduced, Council Members Flanagan and Harper.
I understand. We're taking out as seen in places like. That's taken out. Now let's get to A, whether A stays in or not.
Okay,
Do you
can I
want to say what
speak?
your objection was to it?
Yes. Okay. So I think it is not necessary, given what we have under B, and because B says the LDC revisions should map properties for missing middle according to the criteria that are listed here. And we've already said on the previous page, X number of lots to X number of lots deep. I think it's overly prescriptive to say the specific mapping for the parcel right behind, because I think all of these criteria, the 4 that were mentioned, and then which will definitely be used, and then the others that will be used as appropriate, that's better than, so I'm suggesting that you strike A,
Okay.
4A.
Councilor Kassar?
I would
On
just
section A?
I would just keep section A in because I think that it's useful to set the expectation that it'll be RM of some level behind the corridor so that the whole transition zone flows.
So, can I speak to that?
Yes.
So, what I'm suggesting is this is, well, the way I'm reading it, okay, is it saying this first lot behind, regardless of any circumstances whatsoever, will be mapped with a residential multi-unit zoning category, regardless of whether it's on a transit priority network, an urban core, a well-connected street grid, a high opportunity area, or any of the other 5. So I just don't think it's necessary to say that at this point, because we've already said in the previous section how deep the transition zone may go. So it's going to include that first lot. I just think that there's no need to specify what goes on that first lot. You're not going to miss the first lot in terms of the transition zone. So, it's just not necessary to specify what goes on it.
I think the intent was to have something that wouldn't act as a trigger for the
Well, you
zoning on there.
can say that, but just don't say what it's going to be zoned as. Just say it doesn't act as a trigger.
Then why wouldn't we spell out what we want it to be zoned as?
Because there may be reasons why you wouldn't want to zone that property that way. I mean, the point you're trying to make is the triggering.
So I think when I look at this, it seems like the debate is actually just 2 words and 1 hyphenated word. Residential multi-unit. Because it sounds like you're agreeing that at a minimum, lots adjacent to parcels fronting activity corridor will be mapped with a zoning category that does not trigger compatibility.
No, I would say lots adjacent to parcels fronting an activity center do not trigger compatibility for purposes of reducing what you can get on the corridor, or something like that.
Basically, I think that the way that we're going to do that, if we're going to have transition zones off of each corridor, is with something that's residential and multi-unit. So I'm comfortable going this way. But in the end, I think that chips far away may, it sounds like the majority of us don't think we want to trigger compatibility on the corridor, which is the main goal.
I think that's the main goal.
We're going to do it.
Lots adjacent to parcel fronting corridor will not trigger compatibility. Is that what you're saying? And don't say how to do it?
Definitely don't say how to do it. I would strike the whole thing, but if y'all are
Okay.
insistent on keeping it, then
All right, I think so. So then let's change the language to lots adjacent to parcels fronting an activity corridor will not trigger compatibility and is in scale with an adjacent residential house scale zones
you say, and will be in scale.
and will be in scale. Okay? Any objection to those amendments here to this section 3 zoning? Councilmember Poole?
Just so I'm clear, kitchens small a under zoning map 3,
Yes?
is that completely replaced by the small a that is in the amendment
No.
A?
No,
Let me,
no,
let me read through this
Okay.
and let me try to describe the full amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, number 3, where it has zoning map. That paragraph with zoning map goes to kitchen, page 6 of 8. It's her language beginning at zoning map. It adds the words transit priority network, and the period goes after complete communities. It continues on with her A and her I. Okay? There's a new, I guess at this point it would be B,
Okay.
and it would say at a minimum. And now we're back to Amendment
Right.
A.
And
Yeah,
that's-
except you're striking at a minimum, but
What? Yeah, at a minimum comes out. It just begins with lots adjacent to. That becomes, in essence, B.
Okay.
Okay? And then what happens to then
I don't have any objection to the
Everything
little I.
II is stricken, beginning with II in defining conditions. It's stricken from there all the way down to B.
Right. And does that,
And then-
does that B then become C?
Uh,
I think it does because,
I think
No, it's actually an M.
Then you go back to
Okay.
back
Gotcha.
to the Amendment A. The B on page 6
Huh.
becomes C. At the top of that page, that becomes C. And then we are adding in that list down at the bottom an L,
right,
and it's what was handed out by Kassar.
right. And then,
And then we're back to kitchen. That thing that says B will
Is
be
now-
D.
now D or M?
I think it's, what? Is it M or is it D?
Well, it's
Or is
on
it-
par with.
I think it's D. It's on par with A, B, and C. It's not one of the factors to be considered,
Gotcha. So that
which is
one
what that is.
is
Yeah,
now,
we'll, when it comes all together, we'll get the appropriate.
We'll let the scrivener do that, but my
Yeah.
guess is that's probably D. You can look and see if it's more appropriate to make it M.
and to be clear, it's a lowercase d, and it's the one sentence that says, "The city manager shall provide to council an analysis."
Okay, that gets us to the last question then. Question 5, parking requirements.
Mayor,
Yes, Ms. Flanagan.
I have an objection to F, G, H, and I.
Okay.
And Mayor, sorry, right
Yes.
before we get to that objection, if it's okay, something that you just went over, which was this sheet that Councilmember Kitchen, that I passed out, the L
Yes.
sheet. I've heard from our environmental and drainage folks that as opposed to the words localized flooding,
Yes.
Oh.
that putting the words drainage considerations would be more helpful.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any objection to that? Hearing none, that change is made.
Thank you.
What did you say, drainage what?
Drainage considerations, just because
Drainage
it,
considerations.
we could-
Okay, Mr. Flanagan.
So I talked about this on Tuesday. I don't know why we would want transitions in scale or transitions to end mid-block, as opposed to streets which provide a natural buffer from adjacent scale of buildings. And then the step down to residential house scale as quickly as possible. I feel like we've covered all the various ways that we're stepping down. And I don't know that as quickly as possible is something I want to say without any context on where quickly is and quickly isn't.
Okay, let's consider each of those in turn. Okay? F, transitions in scale should occur mid-block. I don't know what the right planning policy is. Do you usually have those things in mid-block or are they at streets? I think that language is in order because we had heard from someone that was a right planning code.
I think that generally, if we're talking about streets that are parallel to the corridor, we would want the street to be more of a delineator between where those transitions are occurring. But if they're perpendicular to the corridor, the transition may need to end mid-block somehow.
So I would agree with taking out F. Any objection? Okay, F's taken out.
I
I'm
have
sorry,
an
yes,
objection.
Councilwoman. It
Yeah,
doesn't
I think-
preclude him from doing it, it just doesn't prescribe it.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, and then, okay. So we have transitions in scale generally occurring mid-block. Then we have transition zones generally ending mid-block down at I, which may be one that you pulled.
Yeah, I see them as the same.
And I think, yeah, okay. I think that we're getting into a level of prescription that is really challenging because, like you were talking about streets, and in
So
some
you would be in
neighborhoods there are
agreement in striking
alleys,
those
and
out?
I think that I'm most comfortable with a point that Councilmember Flanagan, I think you raised concerns about, but the point about getting down H. I think I would stick with H.
Well, hang on, so we're talking about F. And I think
Yeah,
the question is everybody okay with taking out F, and we would take out I for the same reason? Hearing no objection.
Which ones are those again? I'm sorry.
F, it talks about mid-block.
Okay,
So it doesn't say they can't do it mid-block. Staff, when they do it, doesn't say they have to do it. We're going to leave that to them.
okay.
Okay? Then that gets us to G. Parcels on opposite streets are generally mapped as zones of similar scale.
I think it's basically the
Let's
same
take
thing,
that out
too.
as being prescriptive. So we're going to take out G.
Great.
Okay? Now look at H. Transition areas should step down to residential house scale as quickly as possible while providing for a graceful transition scale from the zone of the parcel fronting an activity corridor.
I think what I struggle with is the difference between quickly and graceful.
Right.
I mean, different people are going to interpret those very differently. And if we're already providing ranges, and I mean, I feel like this is, I'm not sure what we accomplish with H.
Or just remove those two segments quickly as possible and providing for
Yeah, I mean,
for
you could
a
just scratch
transition.
as quickly as possible because we want transition areas to step down. We said that to house scale, because we said that elsewhere. And we want the transition to be graceful. So just take out the quickly. Yeah. Take out the as quickly as possible.
Okay? What?
Or just voting it. I like it.
Okay.
I think if it's a transition and we're moving from one use to another, it should happen as quickly
Okay,
as
so let's take a vote on that. But I would probably keep it in, just because I think that gives a direction. I recognize it builds in some measure of conflict, and I don't know how they would resolve that, but I'm fine on this particular area allowing an ambiguity to exist.
And so the only thing we're doing with H then is taking out as quickly as possible?
That's the motion, to take out as quickly as possible. Councilmember Kassar.
Mayor, I'm fine with Flanagan's amendment to take out as quickly as possible because we are actually saying that in some areas we want it to be a little less quick, and in some places we do want it more quick based on the criteria. So the criteria says some are more quickly and some are less quick. But if you can square that for me, it'd be useful.
And I square that by saying we have both quickly as possible and graceful in the sentence, and that means they're going to have to figure that out. Let's just take a vote so we can move forward on this. The question is whether or not to strike as quickly as possible. Mr. Flanagan made that amendment. Mr. Kassar seconded it. We ready to take a vote? Those in favor of taking out as quickly as possible, please raise your hand. Flanagan, Kassar, Renteria, Harper Madison. Those opposed, please raise your hand. The balance of the dais, those words stand. All right. Anything else on this section?
Yes, Mayor.
Gets us to the,
No, Mayor. Sorry.
Yes.
I keep missing.
That's okay.
In fact, I think at various points I've missed things that it wasn't clear to me on the moment whether it was amending an amendment or amending the base. So I'm hopeful we're going to go back through rather carefully. On whatever
Point
became...
of order. Can I make a point of order? It is after 10 o'clock, and I would like to make a motion to postpone until next week and have a special called meeting so that we can all be fresh when we handle this and we have some idea of what we've voted on today.
I could keep going. At the very least, I'd like for us to keep going to get done through this document. We're up to the very last one. It really only has one vote on parking that I think is, so I would stay at least for that. But I could certainly stay longer. Councilmember Kitchen.
I think a good stopping point would be to make it through 5 with this base document. But then I think it would be useful to stop because then we would actually know what we have as a base because there would be time to put all this stuff in. We would know what we have as a base. I could do a special call meeting next week. We would start with that and then start going through everybody's amendments.
I just got my second win, though, y'all. I'm all ready for the late night meeting. We're here. We got all our papers sorted and everything.
I was just going to say, I just drank a 6-ounce Red Bull. I think we should just get it done. We got one thing left. Seriously, can we just get it done?
No, we have a lot more than one thing left.
Literally one.
No,
Yeah, I just drank my cup of coffee.
I think that if we can do what Councilmember Kitchen is suggesting, we will find that we can finish getting the base document into shape, give staff an opportunity to figure out all of that, and then we can come back because we do have considerable number of amendments that we haven't even begun, and I do think that Red Bull aside and coffee aside, that I think we all deserve to have a bit of a break. It's been a really hard day for everybody.
Let me recommend this. Let's finish this, we get through 5. And then let's do one more exercise, which is just to go through the amendments and see what's still alive. Because it may be that we can agree on things that just get pushed in, In other words, we're not going to discuss any amendments at that point. Let's go through and let's see what gets pushed in. And then at that point, let's make a decision about whether we stop at that point or keep going, because we'll know how much there is that's left. But at the very least, even if we were going to meet next week, people should know I don't have to worry about these 10 things because they're already in. Not to discuss any of the amendments. So let's do this. Let's finish 5. Let's go through that quick exercise, just going through and then let's see where we are.
I clearly don't have a
Okay, so-
second for my motion, but we still need another motion.
Okay. So I move we go past 10. Councilmember Poole seconds that motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Councilmember Alder voting no. The others voting aye. We're going to go. Let's do 5, and then let's do that quick exercise and see.
However, Mayor, I think that the language.
But did you have another thing
I
on before you
did.
went to? Okay, let's do
Yes.
that. Let's do that.
It is B on Councilmember Kitchen. It's a little B on Councilmember Kitchens, but I think it was in Amendment A as well. It is I think it made it in. It's the city manager shall provide to the council an analysis of the affordable housing.
Yeah, that made it in.
Yeah. So what I would like to add to that is,
Where's that?
I'm so sorry, I really have no idea at this point. It was like D or M. It was the thing that we couldn't figure out what to number it. It is on Councilmember Kitchen 7 of 8, and it was B.
The city manager shall
In the
provide the council
original?
analysis.
I think we made it.
We
C.
either made
We
it
made
D
it
or
C.
M. D
Okay.
probably.
And I would like to add the language, the city manager, and potential redevelopment using the Envision Tomorrow tool. I referenced this earlier, that when we had the different drafts, John Fraganese did the analysis using the Envision Tomorrow to show us how much of that would be redevelopment of existing structures, and I think that's really critical to understand.
I could support that.
Is this something that you would be doing anyhow? Yes? Okay. Then let's put it in. Any objection? Hearing none, let's put it in. All right, let's go then to question 5. The issue here is parking. This says the parking requirements should be eliminated in certain areas within a quarter-mile walkshed of the activities and quarters, transit parking networks, except where reduction of parking would be particularly disruptive. Conditions to be determined by staff.
I have an amendment.
And then there was another section that said ADA compliant parking should be required even if no minimum parking is otherwise required. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Kitchen.
My amendment is to B. So do you want me to start with that, or I don't know?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So it's on page 8 of mine, and basically I would be replacing what is in the Adler-Ellis Amendment A with my language. So you want, I can run through that language. Basically, it says that the city's visibility ordinance should be retained and expanded to ground floor missing middle housing in the new code. ADA compliant parking should be required for commercial and multifamily, and it strikes certain larger scale developments, even if no minimum parking is otherwise required, to ensure an adequate number of dedicated parking spaces exist to safeguard those with permanent disabilities, temporary illness, or injury, are afforded a place to park near where they live, shop, or visit others. Off-site or on-street parking may challenge safety and accessibility and should be carefully considered before being used as a means to provide for this parking. And then it just says this is of critical importance with an aging population and generational housing.
Okay, Councilmember Kitchen moves that amendment. Is there a second to it? Councilmember Flanagan seconds that. Discussion? Councilmember Poole?
I just wanted to note that this was a key piece that Stuart Harry Hirsch brought to us earlier today, and I had that conversation with him. So we do want to make sure that we acknowledge the ADA compatibility and ensure that the public understands that we recognize that, especially the piece about aging population and generational housing. So I really like what Councilmember Kitchen has brought for us here.
Further discussion?
I just have a clarification question. As far as expanding it to ground floor missing middle housing, where is it lacking currently, and what would this change?
Well, this is just saying that for missing middle, we want it extended because otherwise it wouldn't be. We're just wanting to make that clear. But we acknowledge this just ground floor because you know we didn't want to go so far as to say that it had to be like for a top story or something, because we're not suggesting there needed to be elevators in a 2-story or 3-story missing middle.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
So does it currently not apply to the ground floor of missing middle?
I don't think it currently applies to missing middle, unless I'm mistaken. That's why the language is in here, to make it sure that to make it clear that we're retaining it.
Yeah, I'm fine with retaining it. If we're expanding it to missing middle and it doesn't currently apply to missing middle, I don't know why it does or why it doesn't.
Okay.
So I would want the options provided to us or the best way provided to it, because I would love for the bottom of missing middle to be visitable. I just would want to see what those options are rather than because I don't. Because
You mean maybe the ordinance might need a little adjustment? Is that what you're thinking?
I would like to expand visitability in missing middle, but I'd want options to do so or analysis to do so if it's not current. Because right now there are places where 4-plexes or 6-plexes are allowed, and if visitability for some reason doesn't apply to some parts of it, I just would want to understand that.
The Brent Lloyd Development Services, the visitability ordinance, just FYI, does apply to new single-family or duplex dwellings with habitable space on the first floor. So I think it would capture duplexes, but it wouldn't, without the amendment, capture other types of missing middle.
Yeah, and that was the reason for the language.
So how about the visitability ordinance should be retained and provide options to expand to ground floor missing middle, just to tell us the different ways that it could, if it currently doesn't. I'm not opposed to expanding it to it. It's just creating an ordinance change here that we haven't debated.
What about the cities should be retained and expanded to ground floor missing middle housing in the new code, and the staff should provide options for how that expansion would occur.
That sounds great.
The city's ordinance should be retained and expanded to ground floor middle housing in the new code, and staff
Shall provide options for how it is expanded.
shall provide options for how it's expanded.
Right.
Any other changes to this? Any objection to adding B with this change in to the Exhibit A? Hearing none, that's added. Any other changes to parking?
Mayor?
So how does this has A, B. So how does this change the existing text?
Yeah, it replaces it.
All right, were there any changes to A?
I didn't have any, but
No, in what's here. So all you do is B, C. I see. So the only change you made was to B, A, and C continue the existing
Right.
language and thing. Okay, this replaces B.
And
I
Mayor,
understand.
I have
Any? Yes.
I
Captain
have
Poole?
an amendment to A under code text, question 5. So if you look at my packet that was 2-4 combined on the very back page, it's very similar to what is listed, what's already in there. The change picks up at, except that some parking requirements may be maintained for areas where elimination of parking requirements would be particularly disruptive. rather than saying, except for areas where reductions in parking would be particularly disruptive. And then it says, for example, neighborhoods with narrow streets and no sidewalks, areas near urban schools. I've taken out the specified examples and tried to make it a little bit more general.
Okay, let me look and compare.
Okay.
Minimum parking requirements should be, you added the word generally,
Yes.
should be generally eliminated in areas that are within the
quarter
1/4 mile. You took out the word walk shed. Did you mean to take that out?
Walk shed?
Uh-huh.
I don't, maybe I'm tired, but I'm not seeing, I'm looking at the struck through language. Is that where you see walk shed?
I'm looking at exhibit at amendment A. It says the minimum parking requirement should be eliminated in the 1/4 mile walk shed.
That's, yes.
Okay.
But I don't know if I mind that. I'm sorry. I could tell I'm tired.
Okay. So let's put it in. Walk shed of activity centers, activity corridors, and transit. They have transit priority network. Is that okay to keep in too?
That's fine.
Okay, keep that in. And then you add transit stations with high frequency.
So that.
Oh, you add that back in. That was taken out?
Right, but
Okay.
if the transit priority network is in there, I don't know that we need, and
I agree.
transit station, okay.
Okay, so let's take out transit stations with high frequency
Okay.
service. Except that
And this is
some
where
parking
the
requirements will be
changes,
maintained
right.
for
This is
areas
where
where elimination parking would be particularly disruptive.
And I have, except that some parking requirements may be maintained for areas where elimination of parking requirements would be particularly disruptive. So it gives a little bit more direction in that area, but it takes out the specific examples, although I am not wedded to that. We can keep the e.g. neighborhoods with narrow streets and no sidewalks, because they certainly occur in significant portions of our community. And we heard about that this afternoon, with the yard bar sound permit.
Okay, I'm okay.
appeal.
I would be okay with your
Okay.
language. I would still leave out the example just because that was creating problems. So I would just have the period as you have it here with the disruptive. So your amendment, adding the word walk shed, adding the word transit priority network, striking transit stations with high frequency
Right.
service, that gets us just up to generally eliminated. And the question is, do we want to add the word generally?
I could
Councilman
go
Pohl's
either way.
moving to take it out. Does anybody object to adding the word generally?
I'm trying to remember what we've done with the word generally previously tonight. If we've kept it in.
They've kept it in.
We've kept it in. Okay, well,
Okay,
let's be.
let's keep it in.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody? So the amendment is as to replace A.
And then I do think that there is some interest in retaining the e.g. neighborhoods with narrow streets, so that piece maybe we should put to a vote.
Okay. The question is whether the amendment strikes neighborhoods with narrow streets and no sidewalks. The amendment is to add back in neighborhoods with narrow streets and no sidewalks and areas near urban schools.
Could I speak to that?
Yes.
It could be more narrow, because it's not really the whole neighborhood. So perhaps the EG could be narrow streets with no sidewalks and leave off the neighborhoods with. That, from my perspective, that is helpful to have that kind of example, or at least some kind of example that relates to that, because particularly disruptive doesn't it doesn't have the, what does that mean, so.
I'm fine with keeping in the examples, but deleting the words neighborhoods with.
Okay.
Does anybody have any objection? Mr. Flanagan?
Yes, so I prefer without the example, because I think those situations, we should also be weighing how those sidewalks are rated in the sidewalk master plan and the sequence of funding. We just did a big bond and there's money coming to sidewalks. So I wouldn't want to say that the only solution to narrow streets with no sidewalks is to have parking requirements, when some of those streets are going to get sidewalks.
Could we say particularly disruptive for public safety or something like that? Because I'm trying to modify disruptive in some way.
It does say in the Amendment A from Adler Ellis, conditions to be determined by staff. And then their amendment had taken out those examples as well.
Well, I would want the condition to be determined by the council. I mean, the proposed conditions could be determined by staff.
That's all that is. It's just that
That's it
this
right
only
there.
speaks to what they're proposing to us.
Conditions to be proposed by staff.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I
And
think
then
we
it'll come back
have
to
a,
us in the end.
I think we have a bingo.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's not going to have the examples. It's going to be conditions proposed by staff. All right, so code text area A.
I have a question on that, if I may.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify if this is the elimination of minimum parking across all zoning types within that area, or is it any zoning type that falls in that area, or just wanted to get some clarity on what was meant.
Sorry, say that again?
Is this proposed text eliminating parking across all zoning areas that fall within that watershed, et cetera?
Generally.
No, Mayor, it is not eliminating parking. It is only eliminating minimum parking requirements.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Minimum parking requirements should be generally eliminated. Only speaks to the requirements.
Okay, so is it eliminating minimum parking requirements across all zoning categories within that watershed?
All zoning categories within that watershed area, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Mayor?
Yes.
In my amendments for question 5, I have in a sub A, B, C, D under objective, but I think it works better under code text to say the manager should explore options for adopting parking maximums or minimum unit yields necessary to ensure sufficient transit supportive development, determine if parking should be counted against FAR, explores the feasibility of decoupling parking from leases, explore options for utilizing public parking in row for ADA compliant, which kind of references back to an earlier thing Councilmember Kitchen amended.
And where is that on yours?
So that is number 13. It's back.
Number
it's
13?
Page 8, A, B, C, D, which I think works better as bullets under, the manager should explore options, which is what all those 4 are. It makes more sense to me to be under code text than objective, since we're editing code text.
So D would be the manager should explore options, determine if, explore the feasibility of, explore options for. Any objection to that? Hearing
I'm
no.
sorry. Yikes. Sorry. I need to be sure that I understand what we're adding.
That's fine.
So this is number 13.
Yes, but it's 13A.
Explore options.
I'm sorry, just above A. It begins with the manager should.
The manager should explore options for adopting parking maximums or minimum unit yield in areas necessary to ensure sufficient transit supportive development. Just A, or the rest of the provisions as well?
A, B, C, and D, but not the paragraph at the top. So just starting with the manager should.
Yeah. Okay.
A, B, C, D. Underneath.
Okay, without objection, that's
It would be
added.
no- it
It
would
becomes
be
into
D
D,
here.
but A, B, C, D will have to be renumbered I,
Yeah.
and IV or whatever.
Aye.
You know what that is? Okay,
Aye, aye.
anything else? Yes?
I have a question, and I don't know the answer, but I want to just flag it as something that we might want, if I'm remembering this correctly. For B, determine if parking in certain areas should be counted against FAR. I believe that we've heard from some of the affordable housing providers that that would hurt their ability to do their projects. And I can't articulate why right
Sure.
now,
Right.
but I just want to
And
flag that I don't think that's something that we would want, and that it would hurt, exactly what we most want to incentivize.
Councilmember Flanagan and then Councilmember Kassar.
So I would say I think the in certain areas is a key clause there, because my understanding is that's something that's more about downtown than it is about other places. And affordable housing developers, as we've seen, the brief moments they do affordable housing downtown are not doing parking. So that's to me, this is like the Google building issue where they're doing 16 floors in areas that don't have minimum parking requirements. This might be a tool in order to ensure those developments. But this will be determined if, give us options, that's all the framing.
Councilmember Kassar.
And more than anything else, we'll be taking up affordability unlocked at the next council meeting where we can nullify that issue.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, those are all the amendments to Amendment A. Let's take a vote on Amendment A.
Mayor?
Yes.
We had taken up an issue earlier, and I said I wanted to go back and revisit it, and
Okay.
so before we move on.
Okay.
And so, yes, I got a little muddled, and I think there was some support for a different version of it. And so back on page 3,
Okay.
where we were talking about the preservation incentives, this would simply make preservation incentives apply citywide. End of story. Not within a quarter mile outside of the urban center, not within the urban center and match it. Just city preservation incentives should be expanded citywide and then pick up so that an additional, et cetera, et cetera. I still don't understand the distinction that was trying to be drawn between the urban core and other areas. And if it's a beneficial thing for the urban core, I think it would be beneficial everywhere. And so I would propose changing it that way.
Okay. Councilmember Tovo proposes that the preservation incentive that was in section E at the bottom of page 3 apply citywide. Is there a second to that? Councilmember Flanagan seconds that. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor of that, raise your hand. Those opposed? Was that everybody on the dais voting yes?
Frankly, I abstained because I don't exactly understand the implications there, and I would rather abstain than make a vote that I regret later.
Okay, all voted aye except for...
I would like to abstain as well because I did not follow.
Okay,
Where was
Councilmember
that, Kathy?
Alter and Harper Madison abstained. Those voting aye, that now applies citywide. Let's take a vote on Amendment A. Those in favor of Amendment A, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Tovo and Alter voting no. The others voting aye. Amendment A passes. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to just go through the amendments and let's see what can be accepted or not accepted. I'm going to begin. I'm sorry, what?
Did you vote on Amendment A?
We voted on Amendment A, and the vote was 9-0-2. Okay, so let's pick up Mr. Flanagan's first. And let's see, Mr. Flanagan, I think that some of
The
the
vote was
action...
9-2. Two of us voted
What?
against. Two of us voted against, not abstained.
Oh, 2 voting against. I'm sorry, 9-2.
Two of us abstained on the prior amendment.
Got it, that's what it was. The record should reflect that on the preservation amendment change, the vote was 9-0-2. On the vote on Amendment A, it was 9-2. Thank you. All right, Mr. Flanagan, I don't know if which of these are still game to go given the decisions that we made. Does anybody have any objections to the amendments 1, 2, and 3 on page 1?
Well, you're not going to want number 2.
Yeah. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
What?
Mayor.
Yes.
I think we can just jump to the ones that I think we haven't adopted as part of Amendment A.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So I
Just
think,
tell us what on your list you would like to still urge.
does Amendment A include urging simplification? Did we do the simplification language?
No.
So I'd like just the last sentence of number 1.
The last
Just so-
sentence in number 1, the manager should work to deliver new code that simplify can be consistently furthers the
Yeah.
goal of the city. Any objection to that be included? Hearing none, that's included.
Okay. Next page.
Okay?
This is stuff from Councilmember Kitchen that I agree with. Age-friendly policies, the land use and zoning categories, which talks about use restrictions should continue, but hopefully be improved through a framework that identifies uses as opposed to just the by-lot situation, to the extent it can be done. The BII is the self-storage or other uses that don't contribute to policy goals. C is developments using transportation demand management tools. So those, it's basically all the blue, A, B, and C.
Sorry, not the red?
The red at the top, I think the simplicity we just covered. And the only red that I'm asking for now is the public transit out, that's part of C.
Okay.
All right, so
Yeah,
it's code next on the base motion right now has the ends with the sentence revised code text map should result in reduced citywide impervious cover and improved citywide water quality.
What?
What?
I'm sorry, am I looking in the wrong place?
Where was that?
Page 2 of 8, and what is that amending?
Yeah, but the mayor was reading from Amendment A, and yes, Mayor, that's
These are all
correct.
amendments to Amendment.
It's page 1 of our base motion, Amendment A.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Base motion, Amendment A.
This one.
Yeah, I got that, but I'm trying to figure out where it gets amended into. And I'm looking at,
Is it A under then?
there's code text out at the bottom of page 1.
Yes,
You would
That's the
just,
section we're amending.
yes.
Yeah.
So
just
we-
make it an A.
We keep
Yeah.
the text that's shown on code text on Amendment A.
Yes.
Including what's in red.
Yes,
And then below that, we have then A, B,
Right.
and
yes,
C. Is C included?
yes.
Okay, A, B, and C. Any objection to that? Okay, those items are included. A, B, and C. Okay? Anything else, Jim?
So now I'm jumping ahead to page 4, which is on my page 4, which is an amendment to question 2.1, objective. I'm specifically looking at CIII, options to allow some level of administrative variance for some building form regulations to help maximize the shared community values of. And then IV on the following page, feasibility of how regulations can overlap.
Okay, so this is question, where is this on the Amendment A? This is question, section 2, objective. So if we come before code next on page 3. So we'd be adding a section D.
Yeah.
And which ones are you looking at on yours?
So for the section D, it would start with C. In general, housing affordability should be the primary policy driver, which I think we've said elsewhere. And then the sub of that is 3 and 4, III and IV. I think the other ones are.
I'm
are
missing,
addressed.
where's the sentence begin? I'm sorry.
The middle of page 4,
Yes?
C, in general.
Oh, I'm at the wrong page, I'm sorry. All right, C, that would become then D,
Yep,
and it would be in general,
yep.
and it would add I, and III.
III and IV. Those two.
Okay, just IV,
III and IV,
IV.
But not 5, not V.
not 5.
I'm sorry, II, no.
I is covered elsewhere in Amendment A.
All
I'm
right,
not
so we
worried
don't
about
need
it.
I, we don't
III and IV, 3 and 4.
3 and 4, thank you.
3 and 4.
3 and 4, and not 5. 3 and 4, not 5. Any
Yes.
objection to that? Hearing none, that's included. Next,
All right. I do want to talk about minimum lot size and width.
okay?
That's a hairier debate. My intent here is, in my language, it says options for eliminating minimum lot size and width. But my intent here is to ensure that we are allowing flag lots and that we are allowing lot sizes that can support tiny homes. And this would be in concert with some of the things that we've done elsewhere in Amendment A, where we're talking about preservation and allowing stuff in the back. It would be great if people could also subdivide and sell instead of having to do condo regimes. And that's my intent with this part here.
Did you ask a question?
Yes.
So how does it read now? Options for eliminating minimum lot size and lot width to...
So I would support, say, options for reducing minimum lot size and width to achieve the goals elsewhere in this document. So not indiscriminately, but as a tool to achieve the other things we've laid out.
And would you consider, while also considering or complying with public safety concerns? Or
Absolutely.
something? Okay.
So Mayor, can I just ask about process here? I thought we
Yes.
were just kind of laying out are we just laying out our
Oh, that's
amendments?
right.
Are we
You're
deliberating
right.
about
No,
amendments?
no,
You're right.
good point. Good point.
Whoops,
Sorry.
All right, so we're gonna
I
flag.
understand it's easy to,
We're gonna flag this one.
almost got that one.
Yes.
I just
No, no,
need to know
no,
at
no,
this
you're
point,
right.
like, are we going
No,
to
you're
try
right.
to power
You're right.
through this,
You're
or are we
right.
just?
You're right.
You're right.
You're right. You're right.
Sorry.
Got it. You're right. All right, so we're flagging 7-2.
7-2A.
7-2A, reducing minimum lot size. So let's flag that.
Thank you, Captain.
What else?
Next page, I'm not sure if this is covered in Amendment A, but where we talk about making it, so this is my number 9, which is question 3, section 1, number A, which would make it easier to permit and develop missing middle in areas where allowed. It used to say all residential zones, now we're saying just wherever they're allowed. This is more of a non-zoning and process directive and not so much a zoning directive. But I can't recall if we mentioned this part of missing middle in Amendment A.
It wasn't changed in Amendment A.
But it may be somewhere else in Amendment A, because I just want to make sure that what we're saying is we can do the zoning, but we should also make sure that we're looking at that the permitting and the development process be easier.
Are those are not site development standards.
Oh, it might be the same thing.
I'm looking at once you reduce site development standards.
So is this another one we should flag?
I don't know, let's see if we have agreement or if it's something we need to discuss. I'm just trying to understand it.
Oh, I see.
Councilmember Tovo.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to read this. I wasn't sure if what you were saying, Councilmember Flanagan, was like improving the process so that yada, 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 can be permitted and more easily developed. I didn't know if the emphasis is on moving them through the process more easily. Or if you're saying like they should be allowed more places.
No, because my
we've covered
original
that
said
elsewhere,
that
right?
before. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
now.
So
I think what's in Amendment A1C is sufficient. The reduced site development standards 4 accomplishes this goal.
Well then, okay. I mean, I'm fine not talking about it, but okay, that's fine.
Okay,
So
so
you're
we're-
just removing it
It's just
for
removing?
consideration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick question.
What's next?
Quick question,
Yes.
sorry. Oh, we're not taking any more votes, right?
Well, if we get through here, we only have one thing to decide, then I'm going to recommend we decide that one thing rather than calling a special session next week.
So we are still trying to power through.
Potentially. Let's go through this process. Let's see what hasn't been accepted. Let's keep booking.
I'm done.
Okay, so we're done with Mr. Flanagan. Okay, let's talk about Kathy Tovar.
Okay. Let me just say that I have amendments to other people's amendments as well. And so I'm pretty happy with the idea of, I mean, I've been here 3, 4 in the morning, but I'm pretty happy with the idea of like wrapping this up soon so that we have a base document that we can all work from. But, okay, but I'll work through mine. Question 1, and these are again just my amendments that I'm bringing forward, not amendments to the other amendments, which I have as well.
Okay, so let's ask the question. Does anybody object to question 1 amendment?
I don't see. Hold on. Where is
Anybody
it?
object to that?
Wait.
Well, the NCCD was a proposed one that is not,
Right.
that has been differently changed, so to my regret. So we'll move on to additional 6.
Okay.
This is the water forward amendment that I talked about at some other point.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have any objection.
A clarification. I'm in support of everything in the water forward plan, but I just wondered its benefit in being codified. If we change, land development codes throughout that process, or the water forward plan is updated, I didn't know how those would work over time together to be kind of locked in place in this way.
Okay, let's ask staff. Can you address this? What do you want?
We're going to
I don't know. I'm going to find out if this is something we need to talk about or if it's something
Okay.
we're just going to be able to handle quickly.
Okay.
That's what I'm in search for.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Brent Lloyd, Development Services, and I'm I do not have Councilmember Tovo's language in front of me. I had it a minute ago. I got lost in the shuffle. But the water forward, we spoke with the water utility earlier, and they feel that water forward is not close enough to being complete or in a form that would lend itself to a regulatory amendment. So I think their suggestion, and I think watershed staff is in agreement, that we should not we would recommend that council not include direction related to water forward as part of the land development code revision at this time, simply because it's not far enough along.
Okay.
So Mayor, I think we need to talk
hold
about
this
Yeah,
one.
that we've got to talk
Tovo, question 1, number 6, we're going to hold. Okay. Anything else that you want to urge?
Yes. I think the language on page 2, question 2, housing capacity, and this is where I guess having the.
Okay.
So this is question 2. This is my amendment sheet that says question 2. I think the language of granting new entitlements still remains in here, and I would suggest we alter it as I've proposed. And once I find where it is, I'm going to point it out.
I thought we changed that.
Okay, so on in Amendment A, the base motion, page 3, C, I would propose making the following changes. Basically, the point of 3 is the granting of new entitlements should be limited to reduce displacement, disincentivize the redevelopment of multifamily housing. I've made a couple changes to broaden that so that we're saying especially in areas, but I think we want to reduce it in all areas where we have existing housing, especially multifamily residential.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Tovo.
Sure.
Which ones of this?
So on
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. I should have said it is on mine, little 3.
Are you putting it under objectives?
Yeah.
Because we already changed objectives.
So if you look at page 3 of Amendment A, in the middle of the page, there's a C there
Oh.
that begins the granting of new
I got you.
entitlements.
Yeah,
in
we made
areas.
so many changes to
I
that. I
got
got
you.
confused too, but that's where the changes would go.
Okay, I got you. Mm-hmm.
And so you would add the word especially?
I would add M dash, especially M dash, existing housing, especially. Scratch older.
Okay.
2 M dashes, 2 especiallys, 1 existing housing.
Does anybody have a problem with adding the dash especially and adding existing housing, especially older, in this C?
She took out older.
Yeah, I changed.
Especially multifamily.
Yeah.
Existing housing, especially multifamily residential development.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to talk about that more, so if we want to put a pin in it.
Okay, let's put a pin in that. Okay. Anything else, Kathy?
On the next page, I was recommending we use staff language. I think we've changed it several stages, so I'm going to skip that one.
Okay.
This is on the back page of question 2. And so it would add new language, review non-zoning regulations related to Austin Energy and Austin Water, other than regular fees that can significantly impact the cost of development. Review and suggest, so let me stop there. Well, review and suggest changes to non-zoning regulations that may encourage demolition rather than the redevelopment of existing structures.
Any objection to that language being included? It's the paragraph under staff recommended language. It says review non-zoning regulations related to. Anybody have an objection to that?
I don't understand what this does.
Sure. So we had an instance, and I've got a little written out example I can give you details about, but I believe it was a co-op, and they were trying to make some changes. This is a co-op in West Campus. They were trying to do some renovations, and they were actually being asked to provide a certain amount of infrastructure for for the area, and it was going to cost more than $100,000. And so those are the kinds of things I think we should look at closely. I'm not suggesting that we look at fees, because I think we went through a real thoughtful process of making sure that those are 100% cost recovery. So these would just be to look at some of those other non-zoning regulations, to see if there are any opportunities there to not pass those costs on to other ratepayers, but just to reevaluate some of those. So that's the first part. The second is to look at our non-zoning regulations that may be encouraging demolition rather than more creative reuse of properties, because I think it is a very valid assumption that new housing is going to be more expensive than existing structures, and I think we make it extremely easy in this city to demolish a house, and we should look at ways in which our structure, our fee structure, and our other, among other, non-zoning things, make that the easiest, fastest, cheapest alternative.
We've had plenty of conversations on demolition. On this sentence, is it only also referring to energy and water? Or is it all non-zoning regulations?
No, just those two.
Okay, and I think it's fine.
I'm fine with this. Any objections to this? Hearing none, that's included. Kathy, next.
City-led testing process. So I think we talked about these changes in the work session as well. It would add in, just to make it very clear, that the general public will be involved as well. And I think that's important because people know their communities very well and can suggest examples and particular cases that would round out our testing. And then it also adds in a line just articulating what I think was the understanding that staff should complete this testing before the review by boards and commissions.
Mayor, I'm okay with this if we say initial instead of this testing, just because there'll be continued testing through the whole process.
Do what now?
That's good. Initial testing.
I'm fine if we change the word this before the word initial to the word before the word testing to initial.
This initial testing should examine. I'm sorry?
This initial testing, staff should complete this initial testing prior to review by boards and commissions.
Change the word this to the word initial.
Got it. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes?
I have an objection to the substantial involvement of the public, because the testing process is intentionally about design and technical professionals. I understand the Councilman Tovo's point about the public knows good examples, but I think the testing process is about the engineers and the development professionals getting together and seeing if A plus B equals C through the code.
We can flag it.
Staff, how is the public involved in the testing process?
I mean, the reality is, just based on, I'll just answer while Rodney's coming up, but I mean, it's my understanding, I've been invited to those testing things. Other people are invited to those testing things. I think usually there are members of the public involved in those as well. But I think it's important that we involve the public in testing.
So
I'm
for
not
the first,
asking them to run the scenarios, but I'm asking them to provide useful input.
Yeah.
Sure. Rodney Gonzalez, Assistant City Manager. For the first two drafts of Code Next, we actually did it with design professionals. It was in-house, and we got a lot of really good information, and that informed the next drafts of the code. For draft 3, Council had asked us to expand that reach broader to the public, and then we encountered issues where some design professionals didn't want to participate because of that broadened reach. And so it's our experience that we limit it to design professionals, and what we can do is we can report out the results of that testing to council and to the public, so that way everyone knows what happened in that testing and what changes, if any, resulted from it.
I recall that too as a burden. Yes.
So is this one we need to set aside?
Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to set aside this. So the question of substantial involvement.
And I think at some point, either now or in the future, I'd like you to explain what you mean by design professionals didn't want to participate because the public would be involved.
That's our understanding. We had a hard time getting folks to participate in that third round of testing.
I guess I would wonder if it was just because we were doing it a third time. But anyway,
I
I look
think
forward to
it
hearing
was-
more about that, and I hope we can find design professionals who view the public as a resource, since they're living in the areas that are going to be impacted.
I think part of it, as I recall back at the time, was just the kind of the emotional environment surrounding that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to flag that one.
And,
Anything else, Councilmember Tovo?
C, we've dealt with. D, I would suggest identifying and implementing opportunities throughout the code to encourage the preservation of existing housing, especially market affordable housing.
Anybody have any objection to that? None? Let's put that in. That's D, goes in as an add.
And then 3 would be added somewhere along the way to the zoning map. Additional direction to staff. Should include additional direction to staff to develop specific context-sensitive criteria for areas where the distance between corridors is less than a half mile.
This is with respect to housing capacity. Okay. Anybody have an objection to that? Hearing none, that's in. Okay.
Back to site development standards. On question 3, my only change there would be to add in, at the point where we're talking about reduced site development standards, as appropriate.
Any objection to saying as appropriate?
This is question 3, code text 1.
Right.
C, but it's been so, that section's been so changed, I have no idea. No, I was working off the base motion, so
Right.
let me see if I can
This
find
is on
it.
page
That's
4.
still appropriate, Kathy.
Page 4.
We didn't change that section.
Okay.
We didn't change it. It's page 4, down at the bottom, in the code text section, is C. Reduce site development standards as appropriate. Any objection? Hearing none, that's in.
Wait, this one was included. Okay, no.
Anything else?
So this section is also somewhat changed. So I'll have to think about where it goes. It was talking about transition zones and indicating that the mapping,
Okay, this is what
that
we're
one
gonna
of the considerations of the mapping would be instances where market affordable and/or missing middle housing, so-called missing middle housing, is adjacent to a property along a corridor.
Okay.
So maybe putting
we're
it
gonna,
in.
We're gonna have to flag this one. This one is flagged.
That's like a gong.
I had people reaching out.
I think that is it
Okay,
for my amendments, except for
Thanks.
those, as I mentioned, that I have to other people's.
got it. Councilmember Kitchen, you want to take us to yours? Do you have anything left?
Okay, yeah, I have a few. I want to start with my addition to the affordable housing.
Okay,
That's motion sheet amendment to base document number 2. It's the list of affordable housing A through P. And so, do you need me to walk through each of them, or have people have a chance to? This is one I've had out there for a while, so. And I made some people had raised some concerns, so I made changes to reflect them. So, Councilmember Harper Madison, you had wanted to make sure that I didn't say prioritize areas close to high-performing schools. So I took that out, and it just.
I think that one was a two-parter. It was set minimum bedroom
Okay.
requirements. It was the word requirements.
Okay.
And then propose mechanisms to prioritize areas close to. Oh, you took out
Yeah, I took it
high-performing
out.
schools. But if I recall correctly, during work session, the word that triggered me here was requirements.
I have the same concern
The
about
minimum
setting
bedroom
minimum
requirements.
bedroom
Okay, do
requirements.
you want to
But if we
hold A for more conversation?
Or just that line? I mean, I'm fine with
We're on
everything
this
else in this document other than, let's see, tie any increase in development capacity to an affordability requirement.
Wait,
Mayor.
where are you? We're on increased
I'm sorry,
supply of
Greg?
multi-bedroom housing.
So, wait, did you already resolve the issue? Because I only have 2 issues that I think are easily fixed. So.
I think it could be
I
easily
think I fixed
resolved.
yours.
I was just wondering, could we do a thing where we offered a bonus for multiple bedrooms as opposed to like the,
think we
like I
better
said,
flag that
requirements is sort of a punitive thing.
Greg, what were you going to say?
Yes, I was just going to say that where you were mentioning, Mayor, the tying any increase in development capacity to affordability requirements, we've debated that pretty heavily today. So I thought we could just have that say, tie increases in development capacity to affordability requirements as stated in this document. Just because we've,
Oh, yeah, we're not on the same one.
but on bedroom requirements, I agree with
Oh,
that we should put.
okay, so let's hold bedroom requirements. We're going
So we're
to
going to hold
discuss,
A. We're going to hold A, okay?
and we're going to hold C.
Oh, C. I see what
That
you were
was the
talking
one
about,
that Greg.
C.
Are you okay with his change? Read it again, Greg.
Yeah, read it again.
On C, tie increases in development capacity to affordability requirements as stated in the rest of this document.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, any objection to that? Hearing none, that change is made. Tie increases in, as provided in this document. Okay, so it's just the issue of bedroom requirements.
Yes, the rest of it.
Okay, anything else?
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
We could revisit D.
Which one?
I'm gonna turn this thing down. If we could revisit D, that would be helpful for me.
The
Bring
density
bring
bonus?
options for implementing a density bonus program for missing middle.
I have some questions. And then,
So you want to hold D?
yes, please.
Okay.
Okay,
And then J.
The PUDs?
Yes, ma'am.
You want to hold that one too?
Yes, please.
okay,
Okay.
And then N.
A, D, J, and N.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else, Ann?
So the rest of these are?
Rest of
accepted?
those are in,
Okay.
except A, D, J, and N.
Okay. So, so now I'll go back to the amendment to the base document number 1, updated. So there's just a few of these left. Everybody got it? It's the longer document. Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
Okay. Got it?
Okay. On the first page, under communication, I have include a transparent and educational public policy under which stakeholders are informed on how their input has been received and is being evaluated.
Informed on how?
Yeah, it should be on.
Okay, so it's not in confident.
Pardon?
It's not in confident, to which stakeholders are informed on how their input has been
Yeah.
received.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm okay with that. Any objection to that being included? Hearing none, that's included.
Okay, next page. At the top, the creative spaces. Propose options to support creative space, including zoning categories specific to cultural spaces and incentives to create dedicated below market rate creative spaces in developments along corridors and in centers.
Is there any objection to this? This is to promote options to preserve. So we're on kitchen,
Yes, but sorry.
page 2 of 8.
Sorry, hold on.
Mayor.
At the top,
Let's propose options.
it's subsection B. Is that what you're urging?
Yes. Mhm.
Subsection B is being urged. Flanagan?
So I'm generally in support of this, I think. The proposed options to creative space, including but not limited to.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I don't know that I want, or that we
Yeah.
would want specific creative zoning,
Yeah,
but, yeah, including but not limited to.
okay, that's fine.
Including but not limited to zoning
Yeah.
categories. Okay, any objection to this section going in? Hearing none, it's in.
The next one is E, and I think Councilmember Cassar may have an amendment to that.
That's right.
Which was fine with me.
If we could move E, except replace, here I'm handing it out. This language it got the okay from Clean Water Action and
I think it's 2 and 4, right?
and Save Barton Creek and SOS didn't have a problem. But it moves E, but it replaces E to little I and E little IV. Essentially, it's asking for, it's setting more of the goal and the direction we want things to go in, as opposed to trying to write the policy and the code right here.
Okay, so to say this differently, I don't know where this would go, but I'm not sure we have to decide that. We can ask staff to figure out where this goes. But Kitchen and Cassar are offering that the direction to the manager include these two provisions.
Well, and mine in here.
It's these two provisions in the place. It's all of the provisions written by Councilmember Kitchen. It just replaces her requirement of 5,000 square feet
Okay.
and her exemptions on impervious cover limits with.
Okay, hang on a second. It replaces II. So this begins with, where does this begin?
It begins with E, the new
Begins
LDC.
with E,
should-
okay.
yeah.
Begins with E. But II is deleted. What else is, what else?
I is replaced with Councilmember Cassar's.
Okay.
With my II.
Okay,
And then the I-5 is replaced with Councilmember Cassar's.
okay,
The
and
rest
that's
of the language
replaced.
is the
And then I
same.
think it should be without objection because it's. I think then it becomes very much
Okay.
just us setting environmental goals.
Okay. All right, any objection to that? Hearing none. E is included with the two changes to II and V.
Okay.
Okay.
Next page is under objective on the next page. It's just the language that adds. Well, let me double check that you don't have this already. I don't think you do, but it's the language that adds preservation of 10,000 affordable housing units, production of sufficient numbers of permanent supportive housing units each year sufficient to address needs. So, let's see.
It did, and that's on page 2.
It didn't, right?
It did not.
Okay, so that's what I'm proposing.
Any objection to after the 60,000 affordable housing unit, it has 30% missing middle housing, which I don't see that you have here.
Oh, yeah, I didn't, well, I'm happy to include that.
Let's include that. So as an addition to A, without any deletions, you're adding
Yeah,
the 10,000, preservation of 10,000 affordable housing units, production of sufficient numbers of permanent supportive housing each year to address needs. Oh, here you have it entered before 30%.
oh, I do, you already had the 30%
Right.
missing middle.
Any
Yeah.
objection to that being added to A?
Mayor,
Yes?
my only concern with it is I don't think permanent supportive housing is accomplished through the Land Development Code. It has to be subsidized. I think it's just accomplished in another way.
But it is, I had a conversation with our housing folks about that. It could be because some of those units are under congregate zoning. So there may be a land development code nexus.
All right, I'm fine then.
Okay.
Okay, so we're adding from Kitchen the language in red on page 3 of 8. We're on page 2 of Amendment A. It has 60,000 affordable housing units. We're going to add her language, just as she has added it before, and 30%.
Okay.
Okay, so those two lines of red come in.
Okay.
Okay?
Next page.
Okay?
D, at the top of the page. The city manager shall provide estimates for the potential impacts of the new map on transit ridership as well as affordable housing goals.
Anybody have an objection to that? Hearing none, that's included. Okay?
Okay, under testing, which is B, this is additional with whatever else has been added to this. It should provide accurate and careful modeling of corridor and transition area regulations so that council and community discussions can focus on achieving policy results and include proposed non-zoning regulations as previously directed by a council resolution, and then there's a number, before final adoption. So basically, this is just saying that the accurate and careful modeling would be done before final adoption, and it's information that's available to us and the public.
So it's adding the red language?
Yeah, just the red language.
It should provide an ending with
Yeah.
as previously directed?
Well, it ends with before final adoption.
So that council and communities can focus.
You're looking
I'm
at the
sorry.
updated one, right?
No, I'm not.
Oh, the updated one added before final adoption.
I'm sorry.
That's all it added, was before final adoption.
So this is on page 4 of 8. Sorry. Before final adoption. Okay? Any objection to that?
Mayor, I think we got staff.
Yes. Aye.
Mayor and Council, Erica Leak, Acting Assistant Director of Neighborhood Housing. So super quick on the permanent supportive housing issue. I think you could say, more congregate housing, but permanent supportive housing is not a housing type per se.
I know, and we're not saying that it is. We just decided to include the goals because the goals may impact the land development code. That's all we're doing. We're not saying anything about the zoning category that goes with it.
Okay.
And to the degree you could help facilitate that in this, that would be good. To the degree that you say we don't have the tools available to do that, just report that back.
Yeah. Okay. We will come back with that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we have the red language. It should provide accurate and careful modeling all the way down to before final adoption. Any issues with concluding that? Hearing none? Yep. Yes, Flanagan?
Sorry. All the heads turned. I'm just, can we just put a pin in this one and talk about it later? Because
Okay.
I want to go back and read the resolution, and I want to understand how much of the corridors we're asking to be modeled.
I think it's more of a question about how the testing is done.
Okay,
I have copies of the resolution for everyone right
We can
here,
put it
which
on
I'll
hold.
pass
I
out
think other
as
people
well.
had this section to talk to too, so,
I have copies of that resolution, which I'll pass out.
okay. Okay, so are we holding that one? Is that what we're doing?
We're going to hold that one, and if Jimmy reads that resolution and is okay with it, he'll tell us, and then we'll let it go.
Okay.
But for right now, we're putting a pin in 4 of
Okay.
8B.
Okay, next page.
Yes?
This one is under 1B, where it's where appropriate, allowing new housing types to qualify as ADUs. I added, I don't think this was picked up yet, I added including existing homes being preserved and mobile and manufactured homes to that list. I'm on B.
It's on B, so it's on page 4 of the Amendment A. This is capital A, B, and C, and this is additions to capital B.
It's on
Where
page
pro-
5 of mine.
Yeah, it's on 5 of 8 of kitchen and page 4 of Amendment A.
Yes, okay, yes.
In which case, if we could go back just a teeny tiny bit. So we left off at B on page 4 of 8 for kitchen. Under code text, we left off at B. Did we cover C, or did we just right over
I'm
that?
not
She
adding
didn't
that.
offer C.
I didn't offer C.
Gotcha.
It was already added.
Yeah, there's
Gotcha.
a bunch of this stuff I'm not adding.
C was already added.
Yeah.
Thank you.
B has a pin in it.
Okay,
Okay?
so are we over on page 5?
Now we're on page 5
Okay.
of 8 of kitchen, which is page 4 of Amendment A.
Yeah,
And it's B down at the bottom, capital B.
right.
And what's being added is existing homes being preserved and also mobile and manufactured homes.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. A has allowing accessory ADUs, both, okay. All right. Any objection to those words? Hearing none, that's added.
Okay, the next one is C. This is the reduced site development standards for missing middle housing. I'm adding a sentence. So it says, reduce site development standards for missing middle housing options such as duplexes, multiplexes, townhomes, and cottage courts in order to facilitate development of additional units. And the base thing is code revisions. And I included, council will need to determine the appropriate criteria to achieve more affordable housing while protecting environment and sustainability, public safety, transportation, utility, and right-of-way needs. So it's just suggesting that we want to reduce site development standards. We just have to consider how we do that in line with these other requirements.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would be fine with this as long as I understand that when you say council we need to determine, you don't mean we need to take another vote between here and the staff bringing something. You mean that when it eventually gets to us, we'll deal with it.
Right.
That's fine.
Okay. Any objection to this language being included? Hearing none, it's included.
That was on page 5 of...
5 of 8 of kitchen. It's question 3(1)(c).
Okay.
I'm sorry? We okay? Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So the next one, which is the last, I think.
Okay, good.
So is on page 6 of 8, and that's under code text.
Okay.
Because I don't think we didn't do this one before. Okay, so this one says, maintain draft 3's no build and vegetative buffer, which I think is the language that you all have. And then I just said, include standards related to noise, uses, utility screening, trash, loading and pickup zones, as well as shielded lighting. So, and then I added, include green infrastructure from draft 3 and continued tree preservation policy, as well as increasing tree canopy along corridors and centers to enhance walkability and curb heat island effect.
Mayor?
Yes.
So I wanted to talk about this maintain draft 3 no build and vegetative buffers thing.
Okay.
I don't have too many issues with what Councilmember Kitchen is laying out, but I do think this is a topic of discussion.
Okay.
This area.
Okay, so
What about
circle
I?
this.
Are you okay with I? The first one?
I is fine because I think staff even noted that it's kind of already a thing. And then two, II2, green infrastructure wasn't really very well defined in draft 3, and so I think there's some conversation about how much definition we need to be providing.
So 2 is a hold then?
So I is in,
Okay.
and I has a pin
Okay.
on it.
And the main text, the main paragraph on 2, because I want to talk about the no build and vegetative buffers from draft 3.
Sorry, are we on little I under code text?
Yes.
Actually,
Wait,
we're not. Councilmember Flanagan and I were both in the primary text under code text, the maintain draft 3's no build and vegetative buffers.
Right, but right now is Councilmember Kitchen moving little I1 and little I2?
Yeah, but 2 is hold and little I.
But Greg's.
Sorry,
did
point
you
of
have?
order, I'm trying to understand.
Yes, we're I and I.
I'd like to just pin both.
Pin both.
Okay, so just pin the whole
Okay,
thing.
let's pin both.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may. So I think what we're saying is we're pinning this whole thing because both Councilmember Flanagan and I are saying pin the no build and vegetative buffers part.
Yeah.
And then Councilmember Cassar saying I and I.
We've pinned both I and I.
Okay.
And the primary language.
Well, there's some primary language that's already been adopted.
But when we were on this item and adopting Amendment A, I was told I couldn't remove it during that process, and we would come back to it. So we're just pinning all of number 2 code next. From
Okay,
that.
let's pin all of number 2 code next.
Thank you.
Okay.
Code text.
Okay.
I didn't say that, did I? Okay.
Okay, that's pin.
Great.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's all kitchens.
Wait, let me just, I think that's all.
Yeah.
Let me just double check here. Yes, that's all.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Yes, that's all, unless I find something else here.
Harper Madison, we've already put in.
Seems like there was another one somewhere.
Councilmember Poole,
Yep,
let's look at yours.
all righty. Let's start with the 2 to 4 combined. We
Okay.
did. Sure, it's the one that's stapled.
I'm sorry, Leslie, what?
I'm waiting for everybody to find it. It's the 2 to 4 combined. It's the one that's
Okay,
stapled in
got
it.
it.
Yeah. And no, nothing on the first page, obviously. The second page, I'm not going to urge that because I think we've already kind of dealt with that.
Okay.
On page 3, where I have modify non-zoning regulations, including utilities, I believe that was added. I think that was.
We did add that.
Yep, so that is done. It's about the non-zoning regulations and the cost of, and Ann's amendment.
And the way it
spoke
was
to
added, it specifically called out Austin Energy and Austin Water.
That's right.
Departments.
She gave an example of, somebody gave maybe it was you.
Well, I was just
Kathy.
going to say, are we talking about mine?
You're talking about what?
It was the example of the cost for the additional renovation. It was
That was mine.
$100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that one. Okay, got it. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure we weren't modifying like
No.
fees.
No, Councilmember Poole hasn't offered anything yet. She's going through her stuff.
And then page 4, here's where I wanted to ask staff a question about cooperatives. I don't know. How are you guys doing out there? Oh, good. Brent, you're awesome. I wanted to ask a question about whether cooperatives are considered a particular type of housing or if it is like a financing scheme. In other words, is it appropriate for the word cooperatives to be included in a description of missing middle housing options? If so, I'd like to keep it in there because it is a descriptor. But I understand that at some point staff may have advised, I don't know which of the commissions, that cooperatives was really a funding scheme. Oh, it's Mitzi. Okay.
Yes, it is a funding scheme rather than an actual use.
Okay. Does it work okay, though, in this document with this, which is direction to the city manager and to you all, to continue to include it in there to as an exhibit of our intention, that we would like to find ways to incentivize cooperatives?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would like to add the word cooperatives to this list, if that was okay with everybody.
Greg?
My suggestion to split that, to get that very clear, is to just have it be housing typologies that may be appropriate for cooperatives.
That makes sense. And it's a typology.
I do think it's different.
Actually, it's not important enough. It was just trying to catch your direction with words the best
Well,
I could.
it is in a list of typologies.
We can just leave it in there. It's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, good. So
are we okay with that language, adding the word cooperatives? Any objection? It's added. Cooperatives
Great.
is added.
And then right below that, you'll see zoning map, the goal of providing additional missing middle housing should inform the mapping of missing middle zones consistent with the direction provided throughout this document. I'd like to have that in there as additional direction.
Do you mean by missing middle zones? Is that the same thing we've been calling transition areas?
I think so.
Okay.
I think there was a point where staff had recommended that we change the naming.
Yeah. Any objection to adding that language?
Mayor?
Yes.
Am I reading this right, that substantively the change is the phrase inform the mapping of transition zones is being changed to should inform the mapping of missing middle zones?
I think yes, because I think it was the opposite of what the mayor just said. It's
Okay.
more specific. It's to the type of housing, not its location.
It's probably fine, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to keep it missing middle zones.
Thank you.
Okay? It's in.
Okay, and that's, let's see, page 6. And now I don't remember if we included this. About the, in general, consider revision. This is under zoning map, question 4, zoning map item, which is number 3A. A new A, in general, consider revisions that minimize the impact of compatibility standards on properties facing transportation corridors, particularly in relation to shallow lots. Is that something that somebody else has already put in there? I really am tired.
I think we did put.
Okay. Well, then maybe it wouldn't be remiss to go ahead and include it just in case. I mean, if it's duplicative, then staff can tell us we've already said this twice. And then B is map lots adjacent to parcels fronting an activity corridor with a zone RM1 and above that does not trigger compatibility standards and is in scale with any adjacent residential house scale zone. And I'm thinking
Yeah,
we've already talked.
This is in conflict with something we added.
We've already addressed this.
We've already
piece.
addressed this one, yeah.
Okay, so just A then on that, and
Just
not B.
A? Anybody have any disagreement with A? So not intended to take anything out, but as an addition, A is in.
Yes. And I think C on that page was also discussed.
Okay.
And the very last page, that was also discussed. So we're done with that. The last one is my motion sheet 1, and this is the additional direction at the end of the document.
About planning. Does anybody have any issues with this planning document? Pool motion sheet 1?
Which one?
Pool motion sheet number 1.
And just to remind everybody, this tracks with the resolution that we passed in 2017. That was the kitchen resolution.
Mayor, I'm not ready to move on the additional planning direction yet.
Not ready yet? Yeah.
Right, I don't think we fully covered it in work session, so I just want to make sure.
Okay, so let's pull. We're going to
It's
put a
vetted.
pin in this. Pin.
And if I could then ask, if you want to talk about it in work session, we need to have.
She said it just hadn't been covered in work session.
Okay, I mean, I think we did talk about it in work session.
In
I
any
think
event, Mr. Flanagan wants to put
that's
a pin
fine.
in.
That's
It's
fine. We'll
pin.
talk about it more when we're fresher. Okay, thanks. That's
Okay.
it.
Okay, that gets us to.
I did find one more, but you can do other people first.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Harper Madison's is already in. Alter. I think we. So we've already voted on 3, and right, we've already voted on 3, and question 2 we already included, I think. So I think your 2 amendments are already dealt with. Okay. All right. That gets us then to Councilmember Ellis.
So I have a version 2 of the motion sheet that I had handed out this morning. It is redlined for clarity on exactly what is updated. So if you still have the original motion sheet, you can discard that one. We worked with staff to make sure that it did what we thought it was going to do. So they had a little bit of updated verbiage to add in here. But there are some portions of our transit priority network that are not necessarily in Imagine Austin activity corridors. And this is intended to allow for staff to be able to utilize those areas because we are increasing transit capacity to be in line with how we are handling our increase in housing and increase in transportation goals. So I just wanted to daylight that there are some spots there that I'm willing to kind of spell out more directly that I think those are okay to include in this as well, even if they're not on Imagine Austin corridors or centers right now.
I want to think about this one.
Okay, pin in this one.
Yeah.
Okay, and Ann, I think that gets us up to
Yeah, this is my motion sheet number 5. I'm just going to take the last one on there that says the code revision, and this goes into question 1, overall scope. And it's the last bullet. The code revision process should provide consideration of the need to upgrade infrastructure capacity in areas proposed for increased density along corridors and Imagine Austin centers. Additional considerations and means may be needed in older areas that may not currently have adequate infrastructure in place, such as sidewalks, we talked about those earlier, stormwater management, water pressure supply, and sewage line capacity. So it says should provide consideration, so that just means, to my mind, that that's something that as part of the code revision process would be identified and would come back to us.
That sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's put a pin in this one.
Mayor, are we just curious on the ones that we're pinning? Because I had an amendment that I was gonna propose depending on what was done, but at this point I'm not sure if the other stuff is in there, and I can throw it out there if we're coming back to the pins.
Why don't you throw it out?
Okay. I don't know if I was next though.
I'm sorry, what?
I can pass it out and then
That'd be
do it
good.
when it's my turn.
It's your turn.
Okay, it's my turn. Okay, great.
We've done everything, but whatever it is, it's in your hand.
All right, great. This one's easy. This one shouldn't surprise you. This is an amendment that is intended to maintain our parkland dedication and our heritage tree protection requirements on our corridors, but allows that if the staff determine that they significantly constrain our housing goals, then they can return with options that allow us to achieve our housing goals while still ensuring we address parkland deficiency, and council can make choices based on the options and evidence presented. So that's the explanation, and the amendment, I'll just read it, so since I'm passing it out now. For parcels within activity centers and on activity corridors, the application of non-zoning regulations should not waive heritage tree protections or the requirements of the Parkland Dedication Ordinance. Should the testing and modeling of the draft code demonstrate the Parkland Dedication Ordinance significantly constrains our housing capacity goals in these areas, staff should return to council with options for achieving our housing capacity goals while still ensuring we reduce our parkland deficiencies.
Okay, let's put a pin in this. Thank you for daylighting it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as I'd mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, I didn't hand out Councilmember Garza and my amendments from a week ago because they largely were obviated by the Renteria, Flanagan, Harper Madison amendments and the Ellis Adler amendments. They were only two tiny ones that weren't covered by all of your amendments and all the work we did this morning. And I think that they likely won't get pins in them. Nobody's brought them up as objectionable in the last week. And it has to do with maximizing the potential for employment in residential units within downtown. Sounds like they will have a pin.
Yeah, I just didn't understand what they meant or what they did or how that was going to be achieved. So that'll take a little conversation.
Cool.
Okay, pin in that.
I don't know that I have objections to them. I just don't understand them.
Great.
All right, so best as I can tell, we have about 15 pins. I think that's pretty good work. I think best probably if the clerk immediately start polling the offices and see when we can get together for a special next week. And if staff could go ahead and try to put all this together and get it out to us, everybody could get a copy of that, that'd be real helpful too. And if we could get out a list of what's been pinned, I don't know if you could do that or who's.
We can share ours with you guys. So you got
know what
them?
you've been pinned?
Okay,
If you could get that just up on the message board or something out for us quickly so that we all have that. Does that sound good with everybody?
Just one quick question. So I thought the overall goal was to create the base document this evening. Is that what happened? And then
Yes.
the pins will come back to?
Yes.
Well, we're really close. We're going to go and resolve the pins probably next week, and then we have a document we can give to the staff and say, go forth.
Well, we have to vote on it first, but yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The goal is to meet next week, consider the pinned items.
Okay.
Once we decide those, then we vote on the amendment, vote
Gotcha.
on the direction.
Gotcha.
The whole goal is to then be able to, next week, after we've gone through the pins, to be able to decide the document and then give it to staff.
Okay, now, not to prolong this, but I am concerned that aside from the 15 pins, between now and next week, somebody might have a hankering to go back and diddle with something we had already covered.
And
Is
they-
that a possibility, or are we done with those
No,
things?
I think we've opened it up. If someone wants to try to do that, they certainly can. That doesn't mean people have to vote for it, but it doesn't stop anybody from asking. Councilmember Tovo.
I do think it's possible that when we look at it all together, we'll find things that look odd together.
I think this was incredibly good work tonight. So I thank everybody. I think we can thank each other for that. A lot of work went into this. All right, anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Then, here at 11:30, we're adjourned.